Rowan is a geologist, as I just mentioned, and has, well, recently, and within the last few months, returned from a fantastic field trip to Liberia. And Rowan is going to, I guess, tell us his story. So, ladies and gents, put your hands together for the fantastic Rowan Thorne. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. I think I'll start with a bit of background of myself. As Sarah mentioned, I'm an exploration geologist. I've been working in the industry for about 8 years now, since I've left university. I've worked in many different jurisdictions, from Finland to Canada to Armenia, Sierra Leone. My most recent venture was out in Liberia, working for a new exploration company called Origin Exploration. So our focus right now is greenfields exploration in the country of Liberia. What I will do is I will focus primarily on the ESG aspect and how the geologist has to engage in the ESG side of the industry. I'm just going to share my screen and put my PowerPoint up and share my screen. Okay, and talk around this. Right, can everyone see my screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, we can see it in PowerPoint mode at the moment, Rowan.
That's fine.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm primarily just I put some pictures up here because I think pictures say a lot more about what I do than I could tell you. So John just alluded to with the aspects of ESG within exploration. I'm just going to briefly talk about my experience of working as an exploration geologist in West Africa and Liberia, and how we've, as a small company, tried to implement these principles in a positive manner. I will start with, I've done a bit of a collage of photos. I will start here in this central photo. What we have here is one of our local community meetings with our ESG advisor, and you see Clarence here is obviously our government coordinator. He's experienced in consulting on environmental, social issues in Liberia with regards to the exploration industry. So as we've been in Liberia recently, what our main target is obviously exploration for precious and base metals that support the raw materials industry. Primarily, we're looking for gold, but obviously working in West Africa, there are other elements of interest as well. So our approach really as a junior exploration company is to try and do exploration differently to what has historically been undertaken, whereby we've embraced ESG principles and standards and aimed at implementing them from the very beginning of the exploration process. So even before we went into Liberia, we undertook desk studies, gathering demographic, geographic information to understand where these communities are in the licenses that we're working in. And we've obviously got ESG advisors, and we're liaising with government and other consultants from Liberia who obviously support our work there, in the sense that they can give us some understanding as to the cultural, geographical, historical sensitivities of working in such countries. So our principal methodology of working is going out and consulting initially with the communities. We primarily do this by sending out ESG advisors supported by local guides, consultants, Liberian consultants, to understand what the local community's perception is of the mining and exploration industry, and how we can work with them to limit our impact, both socially and environmentally, in the communities that we are working in. In these communities, of course, they're generally very rural, obviously in jungles and in the middle of nowhere quite often. So they have very little interaction with mining exploration companies, as Liberia is relatively underexplored. But obviously, as you can see on the left of my screen, we have one of the artisanal mines that we've come across. So the issue with working in these regions is they have very little understanding of what exploration actually is, purely because the perception and what they've seen of mining and exploration is based around these images of artisanal mining, which obviously is very widespread in West Africa. So from our perspective, we have to explain to the local communities what our objectives are and how we are going to work. But before we even go in and explain our objectives, we go in and we listen to the communities before we even kind of try to put our plans forward, because of course we have a plan of work and how we want to work and what we want to achieve. But obviously, we're not going to pursue this line of operations without the social license to operate. So when we enter these communities, we ask what their concerns are, what their perceptions are of the industry, what they would like from us, how they would like to interact with us, what we can help them with, and our transparency. And more often than not, we have pretty much all the time, we have positive feedback from the local communities. They're generally very appreciative of people coming in and asking their opinion and engaging and communicating and being transparent. Of course, sometimes this doesn't happen and there are issues, but the approach that we've taken is that we will go in with an idea of complete transparency and engagement with the local communities, but also not just by listening to their concerns, we act on them. For example, some of the villages that we have worked in, most villages in Liberia, they have cultural, religious, historical sites around the villages, cemeteries. There are areas that are sacred that certain people from outside can't enter. So to be sensitive to this, what we generally do is in every village and town that we work in, we take guides from each community who lead us around when we're doing any kind of exploration. So we're always interacting with the local communities to make sure that we don't disturb anything or in kind of impose ourselves unnecessarily. And also by taking the local communities, it gives us a high level of transparency working with these communities, because they can see what we're doing. And obviously their perception of mining is what you see on the left here, is the artisanal mining. But what we try to show the communities we're working in is that what we're doing is not necessarily what their perception is. We are just taking soil samples, mapping, walking around the bush, investigating outcrop. And what we try to do by taking local guides out with us is that they understand directly what we are doing and how we are working. They can see how we're working, and that gives full transparency as to what we're doing. And that gives a bit of peace of mind. And then obviously then it's a feedback loop between ourselves and the communities. If they have apprehensions or they're worried about us going into certain areas, we can take people from the communities and engage with them and show them how we work to improve confidence between ourselves and the communities. But furthermore, with regards to ESG, how we are setting our practices as well, from an ESG perspective as an exploration company, is obviously working with the communities. But also we are of the belief that even though we're just carrying out exploration, we're not doing anything extractive, we're not really having a very big environmental impact on the area. It's still our responsibility to look after the communities that we're in. And generally with our ESG scoping, with our ESG advisors, they go to the communities and speak to the communities. There are big meetings and we set out questionnaires of what their concerns are with the communities and how we can also help the communities and what we can do to help with their way of life. How can we positively impact these communities with the short time that we're actually there? And what we've done in certain cases is that we've tried to help local communities as almost a gesture of goodwill, and how to work with these communities and leave a positive benefit from our work. For example, we've rebuilt a bridge to one of our villages that we're working in, purely because our ESG scoping study questionnaire showed that one of the main concerns for the community was not our work, but the issue that they had was that they had no road access to their village, purely because the bridge had collapsed. So in that sense, and obviously there's a big community there, so they had a big problem with child mortality and maternity care for pregnant women, because the only way they could get to a doctor was taking a motorbike while in labour to the main cities. So we approached that, and we thought, well, we can leave a positive impact here by purely fixing their bridge, which is, you know, something that we've tried to do to integrate with the community and help them. And furthermore, obviously working in these communities, it's always beneficial, and obviously certainly the right way to operate is engaging with local authorities. So if you can see down in the bottom here, this bottom photo, the gentleman on my right hand side is Sam Cooper, and he is the mining agent. So he is a government appointed authority for the area we're working in. And sat to my far left is the town chief. So obviously being an exploration geologist, you know, we've had our ESG scoping study done, and then that's all been finalized, gone in. But I always aim to maintain a good relationship with the authorities and the local communities, and engaging with them constantly. So whatever work we do, we feed back, we keep transparent, we obviously engage the relevant community authorities and the government authorities. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. Seconds. Right. And I'm going to keep talking now. So what we're trying to do by implementing good ESG practices is to keep a good, open, transparent feedback loop between the local communities and what we're doing and the local authorities. So all the demographic work we do through our ESG and what I encounter, because obviously in some senses and instances you go to these areas to work and there are villages that are not mapped, there are communities where there's no demographic data, so we try to collate that data as well and feed it back to local authorities and have a consistent feedback loop to ensure that there's full transparency between our operations and the communities. And generally I've always had positive interactions with communities. I've always had a good welcome. I've worked with, one of my guides was actually the paramount chief of one of the villages. So I've worked with them consistently throughout. And I think this is the direction we've tried to take with our exploration, is set a precedent now within the industry that this can be done, and it's not hard, it's not costly in the slightest, it's just a determination to do things differently now. And as we're going into a more sustainable society and economy, the need to find more raw materials is going to increase, and we're going to have to start engaging and exploring for new materials, rare earth elements, lithium, cobalt in some of these regions. But the primary focus should be here on is that we need to engage and make our industry sustainable. And that's what our approach has been from the beginning. Our desire to not just find deposits, but to work with communities and do it in a sustainable manner. And I think I'll leave it there. I've gone on now for a while. I'll happily answer questions.
That was absolutely brilliant, Rowan, and thank you very much for bringing us some of your work pictures with you. So round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the fantastic Rowan Thorne. That was brilliant. Now, Rowan, we've got time for a quick couple of questions. The first one here comes in from Rachel, and she asks, how do you play out good ESG practice within your artisanal mining community at that exploration level, keeping in mind that a development phase could come?
Right, that's a good question, and that is something we've had to actually deal with, because you come across these artisanal mines. They're not maps. You can just walk through a jungle and just find a massive cutting in the forest. But what we generally do, again, is transparency. We go to these operations and generally we met, people are like, oh, okay, so why is someone, especially an outsider, coming in? What's going on? And what we have to do is actually explain to them that we're not. Firstly, they think we're there to take over the mine. Okay, that's generally their perception. So what we have to do is make it clear that that's not our objective. It's our objective. We're just doing exploration. Our objective is not to impose on what they're doing, because obviously these mines, subsistence mining, they are the lifeline of these people. But also what one has to make clear is that if there was any interaction between the company further down the line in the future and these artisanal miners, is to make clear, very much so, that the objective is not to take over the mine and move all the miners on. If there was to be an interaction, we would have to engage with the local community and the people employed on the mine. I think that's very far away at the moment, but what we would have to say is that any operation further down the line would be of the benefit of the people working in the mine and the local communities. It's not, our position is not to take over, it's to work with and develop with the mine and any communities surrounding these areas.
Thank you for that, Rowan. And actually, we've had a very similar questioning come in through chat as well, which I'm sure you can address after we finish.
Yeah.
So final question to you, and that's around kind of almost this evolving skill set that perhaps that geoscientists need. So, you're a geologist, but would you also consider yourself to be moving into being an ESG specialist, or do you think that that is just part of a geologist's skill set that they need to have?
I believe it's a skill set that a geologist needs to have. Now, the world is different. The industry is much different to what it was. Our awareness of working in this industry in a much more sustainable manner, applying ESG principles, should be part of a geologist's repertoire, to say now, because no matter where, I've worked in different countries and I've always come across issues. I've seen it in Spain, Finland, everywhere. But a geologist needs to be prepared for such issues to come up. You can't just, as a geologist, you can't go into these communities and be confronted with issues and concerns in turn and go, well, I don't know, it's not my job, it's not my expertise, I'm just going to have to leave it. That's even more damaging than not answering a question and engaging in the first place. So I think it should be part of a geologist's tool set now to be able to engage, even at a basic level, even to communicate and be clear of what you're doing. Yes, certainly. And obviously, geologists may, like myself, drift towards that ESG side of things by naturally. Now, while the industry is now evolving, it might be natural that expert geologists are actually evolving with it. The role of geologists is probably changing as the demands of the industry are. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Rowan.
Thank
and
you.
I think that's a case as well of, knowing what you don't know, so you can then pull in specialists for certain areas where you need it, is perhaps that critical thing, which I guess hopefully anyway supports what John was saying just prior to you. So brilliant. Ladies and gents, please put your hands together for the fantastic Rowan Thorne. That was brilliant.